Welcome to Gamecock Pod Live.
For the next 3 to 4 years, I'll be committed to the University of Gamecock.
This is Rodgers again to the 25, 20, 15, 10. Rodgers scores! Jackie Bradley Jr. delivered for the Gamecocks. Lost it up, looking for Kelly. Touchdown! Can you believe it?
And South Carolina is sending shockwaves through the SEC.
Frederick plays it in at the buzzer. That's a win! Unbelievable! I don't believe it!
And now, live from Studio 54 of the Gamecock Pod Studios, here's the Cockfather himself, Keith Alsep.
All right, everybody, welcome into Gamecock Pod Live. It seems as though there was a glitch on the YouTube. So if you are not tuning in live because you thought this was at 9 p.m. instead of 9 a.m., I do apologize for that. But we have got a great show in store for you today. It is September the 10th. It is Vanderbilt week. This is episode 1848 of Gamecock Pod Daily and Gamecock Pod Live. And in just a few minutes, we will be joined by our good friend from the Greenville News and the USA Today Network, Lulu Kesin. And then Alex Jones will join in as we try to dissect the problems and just what in the heck is going on with this South Carolina offense through 2 games. Let me tell you, today's show is brought to you by the award-winning full-service catering company servicing the greater Charlotte area. I'm talking about Nana's Porch, your go-to for all your catering needs, whether it's a banquet, a wedding, a corporate event, a birthday or wedding anniversary celebration. Now maybe you'd like some food dropped off for your watch party. Nana's Porch is your go-to for all your catering needs. So go to the homepage, nanasporch.com. That's NANASPORCH.com. Get in touch with my good friend Chris Payne, and they will get you on the calendar and get you set up. So I strongly urge you to support this Gamecock-owned and operated business. You can also do that when you go to the homepage by ordering plenty of Nana's Porch award-winning pimento cheese. You can order right from the homepage. Click on pimento cheese. It will take you to a hyperlink where you can order. There have been some changes with shipping due to just the nature of inflation and some of the things that are going on in our economy. And so to get the best bang for your buck, order 4 containers, okay? Get 2 smoky jalapenos, 2 of the great regular flavor. If you just love one of them, buy 4, okay? Southern Foods will ship it out. Minimal shipping cost. Checkout is still simple, safe, and secure. So order plenty of Nana's Porch award-winning pimento cheese. All right, the Gamecocks are 2-0 and have the longest winning streak in the SEC, winners of 8 straight regular season games, 6 of those against quality opponents. They will face Vanderbilt at 7:45 p.m. in Williams-Brice Stadium. That game will be on the SEC network. You get the number 1 crew, Tom Hart, Jordan Rogers, and fellow domer Cole Kublik. Gamecocks opened as a 7.5-point favorite. Yesterday, the line was down to 4.5. Now it's back to 5.5. Vanderbilt offensive lineman Bryce Henderson, in his player interview, guaranteed victory Saturday night inside Williams-Brice Stadium. 24/7 Sports' Brad Crawford says the wrong team is the favorite, and he can't see how South Carolina can win. And this is a game we know Diego Pavia said at SEC Media Days that he had circled on his calendar. And so if I had a pencil, I would just go, not so fast, my friend. It's still Vanderbilt. Yes, you had a great second half against Virginia Tech. I think the Hokies are on life support now. So we'll see. I do think the Gamecock offense has got to play better and play different. We'll talk more about that with our guests in just a few minutes. You do know the Gamecocks have won 16 straight against Vanderbilt. South Carolina has only lost to Vanderbilt 4 times since they joined the SEC in 1992. That was in 1998, Brad Scott's last season, where he was 1-10, and 99 under Lou Holtz when they were 0-11. And then in 2007, Vanderbilt came to Williams-Brice Stadium and beat a top 15 South Carolina team. And the Gamecocks didn't win a game the rest of the season after that. Then to open the 2008 season at Vanderbilt in Nashville, South Carolina lost on a Thursday night. Kenny McKinley got injured. Sidney Rice had gone on to the NFL, and the Gamecocks just couldn't get the offense going. And Tyrone Nix couldn't get the defense going. And that's when they, pretty sure 2009, they brought in Ellis Johnson to run that defense. So South Carolina has not lost to Vanderbilt since 2008. And if you're a legitimate top 11, 12, top 10 team, you're not going to lose to Vanderbilt at home on Saturday night in Williams-Brice Stadium. The last time Tom Hart, Jordan Rogers, and Cole Kublik were in Columbia, it was the Missouri game, and the press box shook after Rocket Sanders bowled over about 18 Missouri defenders on his way to the end zone. So we'll see. I like the Gamecocks, but close. Gamecocks on Monday added cross tight end Caden Ramsey. He chose the Gamecocks over Georgia Tech, Syracuse, and Virginia Tech. 6'5", 210, plays wide receiver. Had like 45 catches for 960 yards and 10 touchdowns. Led the state with 13 interceptions last year. Sean Elliott went to see him play last Friday. Then he was at the game on Saturday, committed on Monday. Will take his official visit this weekend, along with Greenwood athlete Tristan Lewis, 6'4", 200, another under-the-radar Palmetto State get. And the Gamecocks appear to be trending for 4-star defensive end Julian Walker, who committed to Michigan this summer. He had great things to say, and on the Michigan boards, They just do not expect him to be in this class. But I say for the Gamecocks to flip Walker and to keep Landon Duckworth, they got to keep on winning. And we are now joined by one of my all-time favorites and as good as it gets covering all things Gamecocks. That is Lulu Kesin from the Greenville News and the USA Today Network. And also, now that Mike Yuva is the Associate Athletic Director at Coastal Carolina, my only fellow Celtics fan that I get to talk to on the show. Lulu, have you recovered from the late night at Williams-Brice Stadium? I'm curious as to what time in Sunday morning you finally got to lay your head on your pillow.
Yeah. Well, first, thanks for having me. I think I sat down, like put my bag down, got home at like 3:20 or maybe 2:45. And then I think I actually like got to go to sleep around 3:20, 3:30-ish. So it has derailed my week. Like I feel like I'm still feeling the effects of it for sure. It was a late night. It was a really late night. I'm hoping that this weekend, even though it's a late kick, it's not a 9:20 kick. So fingers crossed the weather holds up.
All right, so South Carolina through 2 games, their defense has been stellar. Okay. They kept Virginia Tech out of the end zone, and South Carolina State picked up a late touchdown against the reserves. And that's only if, you were still watching the game at that point. Addison was laying on the couch and she just couldn't hang in. She was like at halftime, Daddy, I got to go to bed. I said, baby girl, I think I'm going to bed too. And I just watched it. As soon as it was over, I clicked off, turned on my iPad to listen to the Beamer press conference. And I think I fell asleep during his opening remarks. But did you ever dream through 2 games that the Gamecock offense would be by far the worst of the 3 phases, offense, defense, and special teams?
Yeah, I mean, when you put it that way, I didn't expect the offense to be the lesser unit through 2 games. I think that there were very high expectations, and rightfully so. I don't think that the expectations should be lowered now that, we've seen two games. But I think that South Carolina in general, I would say that I'm surprised, and I didn't picture this, but I'm far from ready to write off the offense as a whole.
All right, I agree. So how much of a factor do you think the 2-hour and 19-minute weather delay, and then you come out and start the game and your first 3 possessions are at the 6, the 10, and the 10, or maybe it's the 10, the 6, and the 10. But anyway, all 3 possessions deep in your own territory, and this offensive line just couldn't get anything going at all. They're only averaging a little over 3 yards a carry, and that was a lot of the best runs against South Carolina State came in the 4th quarter when South Carolina's reserves were in after it was already 38-3.
Yeah, I do honestly think it played a huge factor. And I think if you look at the way Georgia and Clemson also played 2 other teams that had weather delays, it's hard to ignore that. And I'm with Shane, who was very clear yesterday that the offense has to be better, that everyone has to be better, all units, the coaching, everyone. And I do believe that Shane does a good job of balancing maybe like what people might view as excuses and being realistic. I think he wants his players to know that he's acknowledging factors, but still they need to overcome those factors. And I think that the weather, I was talking to people about it. So you eat at like 2:00 thinking you're playing at 7, and then you don't eat again. Then you're eating your halftime snacks before the game. It's like, I personally, I know I'm not a college athlete who gets paid a ton of money, but like I couldn't wait 2.5 hours and have the same amount of energy as I did before. Like playing at 11 p.m. is different than playing at 9 p.m. And I know that athletes love to kind of use the phrase like anytime, anywhere, like doesn't matter. Like, yes, they need to be better, but I think it was a factor. And with the run game in the end, like, I think, of course, those guys who have barely played know that there's about, I would say, 5 games coming up where they're probably not going to play. So proving themselves early, they were like, oh, hey, this is our only chance, like, got to ball out. Whereas it was a different story for the first 3 quarters.
All right, so I completely agree with that, but the Gamecock defense didn't have any problems with their executing their game plan or playing hard or playing fast, getting downhill. And certainly the special teams have really been quite surprising in a great way for me, because my expectations were extremely low. Shout out to Joe DeCamillis, year 2, the return units. Well, we don't really know on the kickoff return because they hadn't really had much of a chance to return kickoffs, but clearly punt return's been stellar. 3 punt returns for touchdowns in 2 games. Dickie Harris had 3 in a season in 1971. South Carolina was still in the ACC then, and that's the record. And it took Bakari Swain less than 6 quarters to do what Dickie Harris did in an entire season. Just your thoughts on South Carolina's. Let's talk about the special teams first, because no issues with the snapping and holding. Max Kelly kicked off even better at Williams-Brice Stadium. Mason Love has been outstanding as a punter. He's averaging about almost close to 49 yards a punt. And he's also doing a good job getting the holds down. And William Joyce hit a 49-yard field goal and just split the uprights right before the half.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the special teams, it's so fun to watch. It's obviously something that means a lot to who Shane Beamer is, but, does not mean the same to every coach and fan and program around the country. So knowing that there's a direct correlation to the success it's having and the sort of respect it's always had is huge. It reminds me of a quote, like, I think it was 2 years ago, the summer before I got here. Kai Kroger at SEC Media Days was basically talking about how, like, Pete Lembo at the time and Shane have created a culture where people are wanting to play on special teams. And I think that's really evident right now. Bakari Swain, I mean, not only is his sort of arc and just journey really fun to watch at this point, but it's just, you kind of just have to sit there and be like, is he really about to do this again? Oh, yes, he is. And I'll be interested to see how Vanderbilt sort of schemes with Bakari specifically. It's always a worry when you spend a couple weeks and you write 1,000-word story on a punter or on any player. Honestly, you're kind of like, they can't have 5 bad games in a row because you just wrote a story on them. But luckily, Mason did not take a step backwards last week after I wrote the story on him, which was huge for me as a writer. But the special teams unit it's starting to be what Pete Lembo had, and I think that's the biggest thing, is when you lose somebody like him. Obviously, it wasn't Shane's choice. Pete didn't get fired. He took a different job. But I think you have to – it was a little bit of a learning curve last year. But it's really, really fun to see what this unit has already done, and I believe it will continue to grow. And, yeah, like you said, like, I point to, like, William Joyce makes a 49-yard field goal but misses a 45 if I'm not wrong. So, like, again, not trying to go back to, like, the weather, but – a lot of these games when you're sitting in the press box, I know that this might sound like simple, but like it's sort of just very vibe based. That's not how I do my coverage, but like you get a sense really early on, and it just was like, this is a weird game. This is a really weird game. And I mean, like last year, was it Wofford who came at the end of the year? Like South Carolina was down. I think it was 7-0 for the first quarter. Like, and I remember that because my parents were there and they were like, what's going on? And I was like, I swear I picked like a decent, like a game that South Carolina should win for you to go to. So I do think that there's a little bit of like overreaction panic when it's week 2 and things like this kind of showed up like I guess a little bit later. It's just the outcome was different. I mean, the outcome was the same, but the timing of it was different.
I mean, honestly, South Carolina started slow in almost every FCS game under Shane Beamer. Georgia State, I think was 3 years ago, they blocked 2 punts for touchdown returns. Punt block, scoop, and score twice to get going in that game. Obviously, last year you had the season opener, which was not very good at all. And then, like you said, that first quarter against Wofford, LaNorris threw an interception. I don't think he'd thrown one in like 3 or 4 games. He throws an early pick. And so, to quote Lou Holtz, things are never as good as they seem. Things are never as bad as they seem. The truth lies somewhere in the middle. And I think that is still the case. And I still think we're in the discovery phase for this South Carolina team. But to me, outside of a few plays, LaNorris Sellers does not seem comfortable in the pocket, even when he has a clean pocket, which is not often. And maybe that has something to do with it. But in the Virginia Tech game, you had the early drive where they got the ball out early. You had the design quarterback runs, which he's used to. Then Mike Shula just completely abandoned that and started handing it off up the middle or, straight dropbacks. And then they ran the ball a little bit, and then you had the play action long pass to Nick Harbor and the RPO to Nick Harbor on the first drive of that game. But outside of that, even the touchdown to Vandrevis Jacobs, he was way late on that throw. And Jacobs was wide freaking open for like 3 seconds before LaNorris threw the ball. Am I imagining things, or does it appear that he's not settled in with a lot of the plays Mike Shula has been calling?
Mm-hmm. I think that there's definitely some visible growing pains happening right now. And I think that I don't want to sit here and like start rumors that LaNorris Sellers doesn't like Mike Shula. I'm not saying that by any means, but I also know that like Dowell knew LaNorris Sellers like the back of his hand. And I know that Dowell didn't call great games all the time. Heck, a lot of people were calling for him to be fired for the first couple weeks. But here's a player, like the scenario last year, Dowell had Spencer Rattler, but said on the record that he knew LaNorris would be the next quarterback. That relationship started then. He threw him out of practice. He was tough on him. He treated him like he was the next thing because he knew he was. So then, although the play calling itself maybe was iffy at times, you have an OC that is the number one advocate for this quarterback who is becoming who he is and himself. And I think that was such a focus in a good way that even in times where the offense looked rough, LaNorris in the back of his mind and quite literally in his ear was like, I have the offensive coordinator believing in me so much. I can do this even if it looks like right now I can't. And I don't know, I'm not saying Shula isn't doing that, but I think that might be the absence of that is less, okay, Dowell's gone. It's more Dowell's gone than, oh, Shula's here. That's how I'm sort of viewing it. Like, because it points to, yes, the 3 games that Shula's called, LaNorris hasn't looked 100% comfortable. And so in my perspective, I'm leaning that more towards, okay, is he just not 100% comfortable yet with his new offensive coordinator, rather than, oh, his new OC stinks and is not calling the right plays, like blah, blah, blah. That's why I'm sort of seeing like, okay, what's SEC play sort of going to look like? I think that'll tell a lot. It's hard. Like, you have people who believe that Shula is calling a vanilla offense on purpose. You have people who think that Shula's the worst play caller ever. Exactly to your quote. Like, I think it's somewhere, it has to be somewhere in between. I don't think through 2 games the spectrum can be that obvious and it can lean heavily one side. I think that LaNorris Sellers is a player who knows he has to turn it on. And I mean, the Clemson game, the Missouri game, there's statistics that show that LaNorris shows up in the fourth quarter. Whether he treats the Vanderbilt game like the entire fourth quarter, like, that's up to him. But that's sort of how I'm viewing it, is it has to be on him to recognize, no matter what happens, no matter what, play calling, if it seems conservative or not, like at some point I have to take control and I have to be not only dominant, but incredibly productive and stay on the field.
I mean, no doubt about it. I think, they need to continue to play fast. All the players like playing fast. They don't like huddling up and all of that. I think, look, you have this guy who is the epitome of what a dual threat quarterback is, but yet there's no inside zone. There's no zone read. That will open up the run game, because what defensive end, when LaNorris Sellers puts it in that belly, is going to really come crashing down hard when they know the 6'3", 240-pound freight train, if he gets around the end, the band's going to start playing, and we're going to run our extra point block team out there. I mean, and Sean Elliott is the master of that. He is the run game coordinator, and we haven't seen any of that. And Mike Shula was there on the sidelines with LaNorris Sellers for every game. He should know every single play LaNorris Sellers is comfortable with and what he does best. We've seen none of the triple option stuff that Dow Loggins had put in with Jared Brown or Gage Larvadane as a motion man. I mean, there's just a lot of stuff that we, in particular, did not see against South Carolina State, and some stuff we didn't see in the Virginia Tech game. But maybe they didn't have to, because the defense has been dominant, and maybe they've been waiting for SEC play. But still, to me, no excuse for an offensive line to get pushed around by a MEAC team, not with the talent Lonnie Teasley has accrued. But yet, Josiah Thompson, through 2 games, he's regressed. Who's the left guard? It's been musical chairs. Boaz Stanley, he couldn't even remember what the letters were for the calls after Kesin Henry had been up there. He got asked about it and didn't even remember what it is. I mean, there's clearly a disconnect going on the calls, the protections, and in particular, it just doesn't seem like this offensive line is really firing off. And Tree Babalade, he's like the guy you got to find Waldo in the photo. Where the hell is he? I mean, Thompson played 27 snaps, and then they didn't put Tree in at left tackle. They put Jatavius Shivers, who's a lifetime right tackle reserve, in. I mean, Beamer says he's healthy, but to me, you got to try somebody else if the guys are not working out.
Yeah, for sure. The Tree situation I find really odd, and I do credit John Whittle for sort of, I don't want to say drilling Shane about it, but like really asking him what's going on, because it's sort of a mystery that is gets even more confusing with, as you know, in the general sense that Shane talks about it. I think that in terms of wide receivers, like for me, the biggest thing is like the lack of production from Mazio and Jared Brown. Like that's where I see a lot of disconnect. And I think that LaNorris had, like, that's what's most disappointing to me is like last year it was excusable that LaNorris was still connecting with his receiver, or wasn't connecting yet with his receivers. He was new, they were new, but it's like you brought back Mazio Bennett and Jared Brown. Mazio especially is someone you can depend on and you had a lot of success with. And it's sort of like, okay, you guys are going to let these freshmen sort of take these spots. Like, okay, do that. But I think that that's, I don't know, that's frustrating to watch, knowing the potential that those guys have. You know, obviously Nick Harbor has been getting a lot of action, but I think that South Carolina, I don't know, maybe I was wrong to expect that some of the leading receivers from last year that returned would make an impact again. But I mean, bottom line, the offensive line has to be better. Like, regardless if, like, I don't know, they have to be better. I don't care if it's communication. I don't care if it's technical things. Like, whatever is happening, they need to understand the impact it has on the game. And I hope that the self-aware aspect is there. I mean, I do sense it didn't feel like Kesin Henry or Boaz was necessarily defending the O-line yesterday in the presser, but I think that it needs to be a 360 turnaround incredibly fast. And again, this was an issue last year, and it did. Like, I did not know Torricelli Simpkins was going to be as good as he was in November when he started in September. Like, it's a frequent issue under Shane, and I think that if it's not fixed when it matters, they're in trouble. But at the same time, I don't know. I get traces of ODU, and I've been saying this. I get traces of like ODU into Kentucky with this week, honestly, and that's not. I understand Vanderbilt's going to be a really good team, and I'm not saying that to discredit them, but sort of get the vibes of South Carolina just had one like kind of bad game and is going to be a different team in the matter of days.
I mean, I agree. There were a number of teams in particular that had big games in week 1 and week 2, did not perform up to their standard. Even LSU 23-7 over Louisiana Tech. Brian Kelly bemoaned that fact. Obviously, Clemson trailed at the half against Troy and stuck up the joint. And quite frankly, so did Troy's coach. But I did want to talk some women's basketball with you. Obviously, Dawn Staley is, along with Coach K, the Aflac spokespeople. They do the Aflac commercials. So she was at the game in Columbia. She was interviewed on the sideline. Then you see her firing up the students and getting fired up during the weather delay. I mean, how valuable of an asset and as an ambassador for the University of South Carolina is Dawn Staley? It's her time right now.
1,000%. And I think specifically what's so key about her having a really great relationship with Shane is that she represents everything that the program wants to be. And I think that, I mean, based on I'm speaking solely on the videos that I've seen of her around the team, but it's clear they respect her and acknowledge all that she's doing for their program, for their university. Like, she elevates every athletic program on campus just by being who she is and having the success that she's had. And so it's always fun for me. I mean, granted, it's nice because it's the two teams I cover, but like when to see the impact that she has on a football stadium, like you can't say that about most women's basketball coaches, and that isn't to insult them. It's honestly more like football fans are less accepting other places of the women's basketball world. But Dawn is exactly what South Carolina football aims to be, successful. And Shane wants to build a culture here that Dawn has built. And, you know, he wants to retire here. Like there are aspects where he really recognizes the value that she brings. And it's cool to see the sort of, okay, that's not just behind the scenes. They're not afraid of showing that appreciation front and center.
No doubt. All right, so your thoughts on the Gamecocks switching to Nike after this season, particularly as it pertains to women's basketball, because, Southern Cal, they got their Asia Wilson when Juju stayed home. But Nike being really behind that program, South Carolina's lost recruits that you would think they could get. Will Nike and the brand that Dawn Staley's represented for 30 plus years, how big of an asset could that be in recruiting for South Carolina?
I think massive. And I think especially I think I'm one of the biggest Steph Curry fans on the planet. I think what he does for women's basketball is huge. I'm not discrediting that, but there's no comparison to Under Armour and Nike when it comes to individual representation of athletes, whether that's Asia, Sabrina, formerly, Sue and Dawn. And I think that when the limits of having a school contract that they bring are so much. Like, it's not just, South Carolina player can't wear a Nike shirt in an interview. It's conversations can't be had. Relationships can't be made. There are so many restrictions that come with who your school has chose to represent your athletic department. And I think that it's so smart and it's credit. I mean, granted, Donati walked into an expiring contract, so it's not like he all of a sudden decided to break contract and switch to Nike, but there's no better time, in my opinion, for women's basketball just because of the investment that Nike is making in women's sports as a whole, and I think it absolutely helps recruits. I mean, football players, I've talked to more about it just because I have weekly media with them, and they're all like, yeah, I know people who would only want to go to a Nike school. It's crazy how much it makes. But I mean, if you look at the social history of clothing, it doesn't necessarily surprise me at all. But I think that women's basketball in particular, having the Nike swoosh will bring a lot. And that says a lot for a recruiter like Dawn, who doesn't normally have a ton of trouble getting top level talent.
Yeah, so that's just another trump card in her hand. So Asia Wilson got off to a slow start. She was injured, and now she's had the most 30-point games in a season in WNBA history. She leads the league in scoring, rebounding, blocks, and tied for second in steals, first in win percentage or win shares. Nafisa Collier had really got off to a strong start. She's missed a lot of games. I mean, let's face it. This is Asia Wilson's league. I mean, it's also her time. She is in the prime of her career. And it's like I told her she would be when she was a sophomore in college and she didn't know it yet. I was like, you're going to be the best player in the world. I was like, you are the best player in the world. You just don't know it yet. But now she does know it. And is she the MVP of the league? I mean, to me, she should be. The Aces are right behind Minnesota. And boy, did Chelsea Gray get old in a hurry. Man.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Asia Wilson's definitely MVP. If anything, if voter fatigue comes into play here, I'll be upset, but 1,000%, it's Asia Wilson's world, and I truly think everyone's just living in it right now.
All right, so how about Alicia Gray and Asia Wilson, first time ever, former college teammates, were the WNBA Players of the Month for the Eastern and Western Conferences. And by the way, Aaliyah Boston has put her team on her back in the absence of somebody named Caitlin Clark. The league still exists even in her absence. Get in the weight room, Caitlin. Okay. when you consider the season Alicia Gray's had, the season Aaliyah Boston's had, is that 3 of the top 10 players in the league are former Gamecocks? And Camila Cardoso's not that far behind. She's put her team on her back. I know they're not having the team success, but she's been a double-double machine down the stretch. She's averaging almost 14 points and 9 rebounds a game, and she missed time and got off to a slow start.
Yeah, it's incredibly impressive what Dawn's kind of legacy and former players are doing this year, especially. Obviously, Alicia Gray in particular, not that she wasn't capable and hasn't had great seasons before, but it just does feel like she's on a whole other level. I think it's incredibly cool to see her doing it on a team with Tahina Pau, because and obviously the Sparks just got out of playoff. They got kicked out of the playoffs, but like even Fagan making a roster, like that says so much about what the league is trending towards and what Dawn's group can do. And yeah, when you look at what Camila and what Aaliyah and Alicia and Asia are doing this year in particular, it's like those are 4 incredibly solid players that have taken up a lot of space in a really talented league, and that says a lot about Dawn.
No doubt about it. Well, a month from now, women's basketball, South Carolina will have that scrimmage against North Carolina. That's going to be on TV somewhere, that doubleheader in Atlanta. But it'll be here before we know it, another talented team, and we'll talk more about that as we go on. Always great stuff. Lulu, thank you for being generous with your time and coming on today. Have a great rest of the day. And maybe somebody will ask Mike Shula about that zone read thing that Sean Elliott and how that could help LaNorris Sellers. Who knows?
Who knows?
All right.
Thanks for having me. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, you too. All right. That was Lulu Kesin. And not quite as pretty a face joining us now, but tough act to follow, Lulu Kesin. But Alex Jones, our guy from thebigspur.com. Alex, we'll open up with the same question I asked Lulu. What time did you get home and put your head on your pillow Sunday morning?
I think I left the press box around 1:30, 1:45 or so, and then still had work to do after that. So I don't think I ended up going to sleep till around 3 on Saturday.
Well, I think you beat Lulu by 20 minutes. 20. So, look, the Gamecocks are not an NFL team, even though they played both their games this year on Sunday. I mean, that was the first Sunday game of the day was South Carolina in the second half against South Carolina State.
Yeah, I was starting to wonder if that game was even going to start with the way it was pouring down. You could see the wind blowing, like it was a crazy storm. And I was like, man, it's going to take them a while to get this field back ready, especially with those painted end zones again. I was like, man, I don't know what time we going to start here.
So let's talk about those end zones because those are really sharp. Hopefully not as much rain and that the end zones will be as beautiful. I don't know how the weather impacted that. I wasn't really paying that much attention. I mean, South Carolina State wasn't getting to the end zone, and South Carolina didn't get in the end zone in the fourth quarter. So they were probably still pretty clean, but just your thoughts on how the 2 hour and 19-minute weather delay and the opponent affected South Carolina on Saturday night.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it affected them a little bit just because you have that adrenaline kind of getting ready for a game, and then all of a sudden that storm just rolls in and sits on Williams-Brice. And so you're sitting in the locker room, trying to get ready. And this is for both teams, not just South Carolina. But, you're sitting there trying to get ready, and then you don't have your full warm-up, and then they got 30 minutes or so from when the time they could get back on the field due to lightning. So I'm sure it affected them a little bit, and I'm sure we'll get into some of the offensive stuff and how that could have affected them a little bit. I think for the most part, it played a little bit of a role for both teams, but at the end of the day, once you as a defense or for South Carolina, once you put the ball down, things go from there.
Well, I mean, it probably also didn't help that your first 3 drives started at the 10-yard line or behind the 10-yard line. But, to me, the offensive line, what's their excuse? Because the defense didn't have a problem playing hard. And as we all know, special teams were stellar as well. 2 punt returns for touchdowns. And, man, that old game, knock your block off, that's Mo Brown. Like Maurice Brown, that dude, he just looks for somebody to knock their block off. He just shoved a guy backwards about 5 yards flat on his hind parts after Eric Rice flat-backed the punter who thought he was going to get it away. Yeah. And then Mo Brown blocks the punt, and Swain picks it up and takes it to the house. I mean, defense and special teams didn't have a problem performing at a high level. Why is this offense struggling, and why does LaNorris Sellers just appear to be totally uncomfortable even when he does have a clean pocket, which is not very often, I will add?
Yeah, I think starting with LaNorris, one thing I think you want to see from them in this Vanderbilt game is you want to see them try to help get him in a rhythm early in the game. You saw that a little bit in the Virginia Tech game on that first drive. They had those little tight end dump off passes that worked so well, and you didn't see that against South Carolina State, which kind of leads me to believe they're just trying to be a little bit vanilla in that game from an offensive standpoint. But then just in the run game, kind of up front, they need to get a little bit of a push. And something that you can watch with opposing defenses, and Virginia Tech did this a little bit, and South Carolina State did too. It kind of just felt like their linebackers were kind of feeding off of that middle run and just sitting there waiting for it. So, it could be a little bit that there's not enough push up front, but also that the linebackers are sitting there waiting. So, I think, in this Vanderbilt game coming up on Saturday, you just want to see a little bit more, what they can do from a perimeter run game. And also, I think you just want to get LaNorris Sellers back in the run game too. You saw a little bit of that against Virginia Tech, didn't see a whole lot of that against South Carolina State. And, when you watch that Vanderbilt Virginia Tech game in the first half, Kyron Jones had a lot of success running the ball in that first half. And, there's some of those quarterback power plays that you see in South Carolina's playbook. Virginia Tech did a little bit of that against Vanderbilt. So I think there's an opportunity there. And that's something that I think when you get him in the run game and you get him those kind of easy completions early, you get him running the ball, I think that really helps his confidence and really gets him into the rhythm. And I think that helps the offense as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, you touched on it, but design quarterback run, zone read, I think Sean Elliott's the master of that. We addressed it with Lulu, but I really think it would help the offensive line and help the run game, because you have the epitome. I mean, in the dictionary under dual threat quarterback, it says C. LaNorris Sellers. What defensive end in his right mind is going to come crashing down with the threat of LaNorris Sellers pulling that thing and going around the end, as far as he has to go? I still remember Lou Holtz telling the story when he was the defensive coordinator at Ohio State and they played Southern Cal in the Rose Bowl. And at halftime, Woody Hayes jerks him up in the locker room and said, "Why did you let O.J. Simpson go 80 yards for a touchdown?" And he's like, "Because that's all he had to go for a touchdown was 80 yards." And it's the same for LaNorris Sellers. I mean, we've seen it time after time after time, and that has not been a part of the offense. I think that could really help him and the run game. RPOs and quick game to the wide receiver screens, to the quick slants, the tight end dump-offs. There's a lot of things in this playbook, or at least that Mike Shula witnessed Dow Loggins running last year.
Yeah.
And we did see the RPO slant to Harbor on the opening drive against Virginia Tech. I think that's about the only time we saw it. We did see the dump-offs on the first drive in a little bit, and then Brady Hunt got hurt. By the way, what do you think is the status on Brady Hunt? I think pretty much everybody else is going to be ready to roll, but what about Brady Hunt? What are you hearing on him?
Yeah, I mean, obviously Shane Beamer mentioned they were doing some extra tests Sunday to, and waiting for answers back on that. So that's one that, I guess when he kind of singles out somebody there specifically from an injury report standpoint, we'll see. And obviously the first injury report comes out tonight, I think around 8:00 or so. So yeah, but from what he's saying from an injury standpoint, it sounds like they're trending in the right direction. And to your point on some of the offensive stuff, like, running back screens have been something that you haven't seen in the South Carolina offense yet. And I think that's something that, as you mentioned, can help the offensive line because that can help slow the pass rush down, but also just get the offensive lineman out there moving. And, I think you've seen it with Oscar Attaway. He can do that. Russell Faison can get out on the perimeter and run those things. And then I think wide receiver screens can help too, just because that's a quick, easy pass for Sellers. And they have some guys who can make some things happen there. I mean, if Jared Brown, gets back to where he's fully 100% healthy, you saw him do that in that Missouri game last year. He took that 45-yard screen pass for a touchdown. I think Dre Jacobs could be a guy who could do that. Donovan Murph, Mazio Bennett, really all those guys can be really good in the screen game. So I think those types of things, when you can open up the offense, really help the whole offense as a whole and helps LaNorris Sellers just get into that rhythm early on, because when he gets into that rhythm, both on the ground and in the pass game, we've seen how dangerous he can be.
Yeah, I mean, it's Mazio Bennett's been like MIA. It was good to see Dre Jacobs. I don't think he started. I think Donovan Murph started, and then he came in and was the leading receiver, 4 catches, his first career touchdown reception as a Gamecock. He looks like a natural playmaker. We've all heard about what he does in practice. It was good to see him carry it over to the field. Nick Harbor was a factor, even though he didn't catch that many passes. They had to account for him. I think it opened up some things. He did get a DPI called in the end zone because they weren't going to let him catch the ball. But for me, it all starts with the offensive line. And, I mean, I feel like that picture is kind of like a Finding Waldo, and Tree Babalade is nowhere to be found. Why is, if Josiah Thompson comes out after 27 plays, are you putting in Jatavius Shivers and not Tree Babalade? Is he on some secret double probation suspension that Beamer's not talking about? I mean, John Whittle did press him on it Sunday night in the teleconference, and I mean, you got basically a non-answer answer. Tree, 2 games, no snaps, and I can't really say he ought to be starting over Kesin Henry, because honestly, to me, Kesin Henry's the only guy that's really played like an SEC offensive lineman through 2 games.
Yeah, I think Kesin and Trevon have actually been, pretty good. They just need to get some things cleaned up on the other side. As far as Tree, I don't think there's really an answer right now. I mean, he's, Shane Beamer said he's healthy on Sunday night, and I kind of thought we'd see him regardless of what the score was in the game on Saturday, just because I thought they want to rotate a little bit in there. But then, first guy in there in the second half was Jatavius Shivers, and give him credit. When he got in there, some things started to happen a little bit offensively. They started moving the ball, and you've seen that with Shivers last year in the Alabama game when he came in for Kesin Henry when he was injured. Things started to get moving a little bit. So we'll see what they do there from a personnel standpoint. I don't know if they're going to make any changes or not. But Tree is the one that everybody kind of just wants to know about, and it's just not really an answer right now. What's going on?
I mean, I look at the PFF grades, but I just look at their play, and Josiah Thompson, I see no progression through the first 2 games. It's like he's back to being a true freshman. And to me, for a 5-star guy with all the tools and a guy that's now bigger and stronger after being in school for a year and a half, it just seems like he's struggling, as is pretty much everybody else. I mean, Boaz Stanley, Rodney Newsom, I don't know. Thankfully, they recognize that guy does not need to be on the field. I think I don't see how you go 2 weeks and decide, well, this is our guy at left guard. But, I mean, is it time to start questioning Lonnie Teasley as an offensive line coach? Because he evaluates these guys. He brings in a lot of highly touted guys. He brings in these transfers. And, the offensive line it takes half a season for them to get going every single year. And in 2023, they never got going.
Yeah, I think that's something that you would have liked to see early. Virginia Tech and even South Carolina State was to get some momentum early from an upfront standpoint on offense. And as Shane Beamer mentioned, there's some that's not their fault. Sometimes LaNorris holds the ball for too long. Sometimes there's some other blocks that are missed. But I think this Saturday against Vanderbilt, they just need to come out there kind of with a chip on their shoulder and kind of prove it. Because I think that's what a lot of people are waiting on to see with those guys up front. So I think there's a lot of motivation that they have to go out there and do it. They just now have to go out there and do it against a Vanderbilt defensive line that, they've got some guys up there and kind of disruptive the other night in that second half.
I agree. So let's talk about the good. The ugly's clearly been the offense. The bad has been the injuries, but the good has been the special teams and the defense. Let's talk about the defense first. South Carolina's first team defense has allowed 12 points in 2 games that they were on the field. South Carolina State scored a late touchdown against South Carolina's reserves and some walk-ons out there. Shout out to Risher and Buddy Mack. But, through 2 games, I had no idea South Carolina's defense and special teams would be far outperforming an offense that returned key pieces on the offensive line and weapons in the pass game, and a Heisman Trophy candidate quarterback who was first team preseason All-SEC.
Yeah, and I think to that point, that's what gives you, a lot of hope about what South Carolina could be this year, just because, you have to feel like they'll get things figured out offensively, especially with a guy like Norris Sellers at quarterback. Then you have what the defense has done so far in special teams, which has been, really good, obviously. And from a defensive standpoint, there's not a whole lot to complain about with that first group. They've been pretty solid. The one thing is just, it feels like, some of those 50-50 balls they need to continue improving on. There's still a few catches South Carolina State made in this last game. Then also just help, with Brandon Cisse going out in that game. He would be a pretty key piece for this defense in this game on Saturday against Vanderbilt. Then Kilgore is obviously out. But we'll see on him. We'll see on the injury report tonight. But I think from a secondary, DQ Smith and Peyton Williams have been really solid. Those corners, Cisse when he's in has been really good. Collier, he was in crutches and in a knee brace on Saturday, so we'll see what his status is going to be moving forward. And then Miles Norwood, we talked about early in the preseason, the depth that they have at cornerback, and it's being tested early on, and it's been good that they have it just because, for half a game they had basically, even a little bit more than half a game they had, or actually a game and a half, they had one of their cornerbacks down, starting cornerbacks down, and maybe possibly even 2 with when Cisse went down in the South Carolina State game. So you're seeing the depth, and Bakari Swain has really stepped up there. But then you also saw Jaquel Holman come in that South Carolina State game. So they got some depth in those linebackers. The South Carolina State game really wasn't a linebacker game. They weren't going to put up crazy stats in that game just because of how quick South Carolina State was trying to get the ball out and really not trying to run the ball too much. But those guys are going to be really key in this Vanderbilt game with what Vanderbilt does offensively with some of the kind of eye candy motion stuff and some of the runs up the middle. Like, it's going to be they're going to need a big game for Fred Johnson and Justin Okoronkwo and Sean Murphy. Then I think the question, for South Carolina defensively coming in was just those interior defensive tackles and how they were going to replace those guys. And I think you've liked what you've seen from those guys so far. Monkel Goodwin was really good in that Virginia Tech game. Nick Barrett's been solid. Gabriel Brownlow-Dindy's maybe not showing up in the stat book as much, but he's been really disruptive in there and got us, clogging up double teams and things like that. And again, he's going to be another one that's going to be a key piece for South Carolina's Vanderbilt game with what they do. And then, Dylan Stewart's been Dylan Stewart. And then Brian Thomas, I think, has, almost quietly, I think, been off to a really good start this season. I mean, he was extremely disruptive South Carolina State game. And we always talk about, his motor and how hard he plays. Like he's continued to do that, but I think even gotten more technical, better technically and fundamentally sound with what he's been able to do from a pass rush standpoint. I think he's just been really good, and that's really helped that defensive line as a whole.
Yeah, I think they need to get JT Gear back. Hopefully they get him back this week. Collier, we'll see. But, I mean, even Hallman got banged up and had to go out, and you were with your fourth nickel with Kelvin Hunter, and he had to play basically 3 quarters. And I thought he had some plays that showed his inexperience, but I mean, he's your fourth nickel and now he's playing the whole game. Hopefully that is not the case against Vanderbilt. Quite frankly, I think they probably got Kilgore stretched out. Maybe he was going to go, maybe he wasn't, but certainly after a 2-hour and 20-minute weather delay, that's like a starting pitcher, going out there and throwing a couple of innings, and then you have a long-ass rain delay. He's usually not coming back. And so I could see that with Kilgore, Kilgore, hopefully, South Carolina needs all hands on deck. Miles Norwood's another guy that's been playing. Gerald Kilgore and your guy, David Busey. They're showing up. We even saw finally had a Jalewis Solomon sighting on Saturday night. So I just think, Torian Gray's doing Torian Gray things. That's still the deepest, most talented unit. But I also will add in on the defensive tackles, Troy Pikes. That dude, I see the quick twitch ability and the get off from him. I think maybe the quickest, and I'm with you. Dindy is not getting a lot of stats, but that's because he's mostly 2 guys are having to account for him, and that just opens it up for everybody else.
Yeah, I completely forgot to mention Troy Pikes, and he stood out in that Virginia Tech game, and he's going to be one where he'll give them, and I think I may have said this on here last week, like he'll give them a lot this year, and you've already seen that, but he could be a guy down the road that when he's working under Travian Robinson, that's going to be really good. Like, you see a little bit of like a Tonka Hemingway in him, a little bit of a TJ Sanders and some of the things he can do. And I mean, you kind of are seeing why Ohio State and Georgia, some of those teams really want him out of the transfer portal. And that's huge just from a rotation standpoint, because you kind of, through 2 games, you see what the rotation is going to be right now. Like, most likely those starters are going to be Monkel Goodwin and Nick Barrett. Then you're also going to have Gabriel Brownlow-Dindy in there. You're going to have Troy Pikes in there. You're really seeing that rotation starting to form. That's about what they had last year with 4 to 5 guys or so that they wanted to rotate in there. So it seems like, it may be a little bit too early right now to say that question is for sure answered on the defensive tackle room. Like we'll get a good answer on that this week with Vanderbilt. But early signs are positive for sure.
Yeah, I mean, the next 3 games will tell a lot. I do think those guys will get better as the season goes on, just because of the inexperience and for the transfers, the lack of playing time at this level. But I mean, 10.5 points per game and 1 touchdown, and that was against your reserves. I mean, Clayton White's unit's performing. So far so good there, and I'm with you at linebacker. And then we saw Jaron Willis out there, and he gets a scoop and score, 45 5 yards. He raced off to the end zone. He's pretty fast for a guy that's 254 pounds.
Yeah, when he was running that ball back, that fumble, he made a couple of cuts. It's like, man, get this guy a look at running back. Like the way he was, like he got the size for it. And he got some good speed too. I was like, man, he looked pretty good. And just from a speed perspective, like that's what the kind of the story of this defense has been the past 2 years. And from a speed standpoint, they've kind of picked up where they left off. And that's when you dive into the matchup against Vanderbilt, you got to have defensive speed with what they do. And that I think kind of going into that matches up well for South Carolina.
No doubt. So special teams, stellar start, in my opinion. Like the toughest kick for a right-footed kicker is from the left hash mark. Sometimes they're going to push it a little too far right. William Joyce had that happen, but then from the right hash mark, right before the half, he drills a 49-yard field goal. Mason Love, 5 punts, 49-yard average. Cole Rasmussen, no issues on any of the snaps. Mason Love getting the holds down, and then the coverage units have been outstanding. And I mean, Bakari Swain, in 6 quarters, he's tied South Carolina's season record for punt returns for touchdowns. I mean, Dickie Harris did it in 1971. I think they played 11 games then. And it took Swain a game and a half to do it. I mean, I said it, Alex, I said it. I thought for the last 2 years he might have been South Carolina's best wide receiver, but they sold him on being a defensive player. We're seeing his explosiveness and ability to run the ball in the open field, and seeing him step it up on defense. Just how impressed are you with Joe DeCamillis in year 2? Because to me, my expectations were like here, and now they're way up here.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to be really, if you're the South Carolina coaching staff, you got to be pleased with what you've seen so far, especially going into the season with, all those important pieces to replace them. I think it was good, as you mentioned, for William Joyce to hit that 49-yarder just because, if he would not have had another opportunity after that missed field goal, like, you have to wonder, about a confidence standpoint. But, I mean, he went out there and, went right down the middle on that 49-yarder. So I think, overall you're glad there. He's made all his extra points, no issues there too. And then Max Kelly, too, you got to mention him at kickoff. I mean, it seems like he's done his job, too, as a true freshman out there. And then Mason Love, I think that's the one, of all the spots you had to fill, like that's one you felt most confident about just because you saw the potential of Mason Love. Even in warm-up before games, you saw him out there just, booming these punts. So that, it has been too surprising to see him do what he's been able to do. And then, just from a return standpoint, even, we talked about Bakari Swain just a second, but even Nick Harbor had a really good return that got called back for holding. And I think that's kind of what you want to see. And it's so hard on kickoffs these days just because a lot of teams just kick it out the back of the end zone. But I think, it kind of feels like they got a chance to break one there too. And then Bakari Swain's just been electric. Like he's been the spark they've needed for 2 games now to get some points on the board. And I mean, it's just, overall, like it's really impressive just because from what he's able to do when he catches the ball and able to make guys miss, but then also they've just been really disciplined from a blocking standpoint. Those punt returns have, bring so many opportunities for, big hits on guys, or you always see blindside blocks or blocking the backs. And on 3 of them now, they have not had one of those. And you constantly see guys doing that kind of new thing where they, put their hands up and kind of just run in front of the guy. So they're obviously, you can tell how, you can see how well coached they are. And really in all those special teams phases, and for that to be one of the biggest questions for guys to replace on special teams, I think you got to be pretty pleased with what you see so far.
So I got to say, my guy Maurice Brown, he wears number 44. He wears the neck roll.
Yeah.
I mean, he is just a throwback football player. I mean, he's that guy from Knock Your Block Off, and he's just looking to obliterate anybody that gets in his way. I mean, we've seen it through his career on special teams. the first play of the season, he just runs over a guy. Honestly, if the wide receiver would have blocked, he would have probably scored a touchdown on that. How valuable is he on special teams? He blocks the punt. On the first return, he shoves a guy backwards 5 yards onto his hind parts in the end zone. And he's just a headhunter. I mean, he's like a guy from the 1970s in the NFL. He's just looking to, it's like kill, kill, kill.
Yeah, he's just a really physical football player and a guy that I think you're probably going to see a little bit more offensively. You've already seen that too. I mean, you mentioned the first play, but depending on what Brady Hunt's status is, like you may be seeing Maurice Brown more at tight end, but and I forgot to mention from a special teams standpoint, from when other teams are playing, South Carolina's got them other teams really kind of in the blind just because they're so good at getting to the punter too and blocking punts, but now you got to worry about Bakari Swain back there. So what do you kind of the other point team? Like what do you do? Like, you don't want to kick it to Bakari Swain, but you got to be careful. Like those little rugby punts can probably be a little bit of an issue just because of how quick South Carolina can get back there to the punter. But Maurice Brown, that guy's just on every special teams unit. You can see why. I think the coaching staff really, really likes him just because he wants to do the special teams things, but you're also seeing his development as a football player do that on offense. And I think he's going to be more of a threat. And I think even if Brady Hunt was healthy, I think he could be more in there on tight end just because Sean Elliott's mentioned the explosive he is, and I think you're starting to see that, and it's going to be interesting to watch him develop. I think he's going to continue doing what he's been doing on special teams, but I'm interested to see his role at tight end grow too.
Shoot, put him in the backfield. Give him a couple of carries. I was at Oklahoma last year on that 2-point conversion. He essentially ran over 3 Sooners to get in the end zone on that play. He's a tremendous blocker, physical player. It was also good to see more Michael Smith on Saturday night because I think they need to get him going because he could be Joshua Simon plus with his size, speed, athletic ability, catch radius. He's a special player. They got to get him going. And then, Alex, I think they got to go more up tempo. The players like that and just get the ball out quicker. I think that helps everybody.
Yeah, that's something on that first drive against Virginia Tech. They ran some tempo. And, when South Carolina's had success offensively so far through 2 games, it feels like tempo has been there. You saw that in the second half on that first drive. They got some tempo going. And, again, that goes back to what we were talking about earlier. I think that helps him more. It's just it gets him into rhythm, gets him confident, and those quick little slants. With some of the different things South Carolina can press defenses on with Morris's legs, Russell Faison, Nick Carter. Like, there's so much to think about offense defensively based on that. You run some tempo. I think you're going to lead. There's some things where we have some open receivers. Not to compare South Carolina's offense to Tennessee, but you see that with Tennessee, where the way they spread you out and run that quick up tempo, they catch defenses off guard so many times that they have to receivers constantly. I think there's a lot of things you want to see with this offense against Vanderbilt. Tempo is one of them, along with the other things we mentioned on here.
No doubt. So, Alex, let's talk a little recruiting. Latest commitment for the Gamecocks. Caden Ramsey committed on Monday. 6'5", about 210 from Cross High School. Big-time athlete, plays above the rim in basketball, plays wide receiver, had 13 interceptions in 14 games last year. About 40 or 45 catches for close to 1,000 yards and 9 or 10 touchdowns. What kind of player is Caden Ramsey? And really, you got 2 guys, both of them will make their official visits this weekend, in him and Tristan Lewis, that are just the quintessential under-the-radar South Carolina guys that are SEC athletes.
Yeah, Tristan Lewis, who he's like you mentioned, is another one. Like he put up some really good numbers this past week against Dorman. But with Caden Ramsey, like he kind of just looks like what they want at that tight end spot. Guy that's, as you mentioned, 6'5", 203, but I mean, just an extremely productive guy at across high school. Like you mentioned, the 13 interceptions, like that's just insane. And I think that kind of shows his playmaking ability and kind of instinctive things that he has. But a guy that you can see him when he gets into a college weight room and puts on the weight and gets into nutrition and all that. He could end up being a weapon for them down the road. It may take a year or so, it may take a redshirt year, but at that 6'5" thing, he kind of just you can see him being a guy that, if they get the weight on him, being a guy that's inline tight end, it could be a threat there. But then also it feels like he could be some mismatches there in the slot and tight end, be like a red zone type of guy that can really force a lot of mismatches when you get up against a nickel or a corner. It's just, a lot of times you've seen with South Carolina recruiting these types of guys that, the Gamecocks find end up working out in the long run. I mean, you've seen that under Shane Beamer already, and I think Peyton is another one of those guys too. Tristan Lewis is another one of those guys.
No doubt about it. So, a lot of talk about Julian Walker, a lot of buzz on the Michigan boards. Their insiders think it's just a matter of when, not if, Julian Walker winds up flipping back to South Carolina. I'm going to say not so fast. I think how this season plays out could play a role in that, but it seems like from what he's saying, his dad is totally bought into the culture, and maybe they do want to make South Carolina their home in the long term. What do you think about Julian Walker and just how big of a flip would that be for Shane Beamer and the Gamecocks?
Yeah, I mean, it'd be huge just because, I mean, he's a really good player. And, like, Dutch Fork this year is loaded, and he's one of their top players this year. I mean, got a 6'6", 252. Like, you see him down there. I mean, he already looks like he could be playing college ball right now and fit right in with those guys. Like, I mean, but, whenever he committed to Michigan in the summer, like, you always kind of felt like the door was still going to be open for South Carolina. They just had to kind of stick with it. And obviously, it was big getting him in for that unofficial visit. Obviously, the connections that he has with his dad, Janelle Walker, on the staff too. It could be one that goes. I kind of agree with what you're saying too. Like, there's still some work to be done for South Carolina to get that done, and could depend on how both seasons go for South Carolina and Michigan. But I think the thing you say for sure is that the door is open and there's still communication going on there, and hard to doubt Spurgeon Lucas and what he's doing. That he's built a strong relationship with Julian Walker, and if they're able to do that, it'd be a huge win for South Carolina because that's a really, really good player.
I mean, the two flip guy candidates I'm really looking at is Walker and Tamarian Watkins from up in Rock Hill. Again, we'll see. College Station is Clemson without the lake, but anyway, so two Gamecock commitments made unofficial visits to other places last week. KJ Johnson was at Mississippi State, and I got a fever, and the only cure is more cowbell. I mean, Mississippi State, 3rd and 9 with 41 seconds to go from their own 42, hit a guy for a 58-yard touchdown. They stunned Arizona State. That was a crazy environment in Stark Vegas. And then Landon Duckworth was at LSU, where they were kind of flat, just like Clemson was, just like South Carolina was. It seems a lot of teams, I don't know, Virginia Tech, they just woof. They were not the same after halftime. A lot of teams that played in those big opening weekend games just were kind of flat. But, your thoughts on Duckworth at LSU and KJ Johnson at Mississippi State, how much of a flip threat are those two guys, particularly Duckworth, who I think is critical for this class?
Yeah, still feel good about South Carolina, both of those guys. KJ Johnson will actually be back this weekend. He's going to be at the South Carolina for the Vanderbilt game. So, I got, KJ's a guy that's kind of from that area down there in Alabama, but close to Mississippi State and all that. So, I got, I think he just went there just to see, but it seems like he's locked in, and it's good to know that he'll be back again this weekend. And same for Landon Duckworth. Like, I think LSU's trying to make a push there and trying to make him their guy, but I think he's been pretty locked in with South Carolina, and I think the staff still feels good about things there with him. Again, it's good that he's going to be in this weekend. I think you didn't have a chance to solidify things with him moving forward.
All right, Alex. Great stuff as always. Appreciate you being with us. I love just chopping it up and talking ball and talking Cruton. It's, Gordon Gekko said, money never sleeps, buddy boy. And, recruiting never sleeps in college football.
Never.
And so long way to go to December. Gamecocks, 16 commitments now, still kind of on the light side. I think, they really, even if you just go 2-1 in these next 3 games, I think you're going to have a lot of momentum going into October, where you got a real shot after that open date to, get some huge wins. And certainly the way Oklahoma looks is a lot different. Alabama, we'll see, but LSU and Oklahoma, they're for real in my mind.
Yeah, it's a big game this weekend for South Carolina. Vanderbilt, that's a team you see it with the betting line. That's a good team. That's going to be a challenge for South Carolina. But if they're able to find a way to get it done this weekend, that makes that Missouri game massive. It's been massive for a while. It's real honestly going to be massive either way. What the outcome is this weekend. But as you mentioned, if you're able to go at least 2-1 through these next 3, you get into that bye for LSU. You got a ton of momentum not only on the football field, but that's going to especially help the recruiting come off from what they were able to do last year. So it's a whole lot of fun to keep up.
No doubt about it, Alex. Great stuff. Everybody go to thebigspur.com. They got everything covered from Gamecock football and recruiting. A pleasure as always, Alex. Be well, and we'll look forward to catching up with you down the road.
Always enjoy it. See you next time.
All right. All right, that was Alex Jones. Great show today, as always. Love chopping it up. Love talking the W. And Dawn Staley, her players are taking over the league, folks. And that's important because girls are watching that. Big-time recruits are watching that. Gamecocks hosted a couple of big-time recruits over the weekend. So we'll have more on women's basketball recruiting coming up. So appreciate Lulu Kesin and Alex Jones for them. This is Keith Allsep. This has been Gamecock Pod Live for September the 10th, episode number 1848. And make sure to go and order your Nana's Porch pimento cheese and order 4 or more containers. All right, until next week, we'll be back same bat time. Oh, well, let's scratch that. Same cock time, same cock channel. Keith Allsep, I'm cocked and loaded, and I am out of here.